All right, number 2, find the right resources. So there's a couple of different versions of this, what I mean by resources. And one of them is sort of the obvious things like the books that are out there. There's a bunch of guidebooks, there's a bunch of other sort of specific books. So I'm gonna just sort of jot down, find the right books. And I'm gonna give you a couple of quick examples. The MEEB book, which would be Mechanical and Electrical Equipment for Buildings. This is by far the driest book you will ever read. In fact, you're not gonna read it. You're just gonna use it as a reference. You're gonna scan through it, look for things that you don't understand about systems and how these things work. It is the go-to Bible for that stuff, and everything is incredibly well explained if you just kind of go through just the parts that you need to go through. Don't try to read it from beginning to end. You will not live to tell the tale. But MEEB is a great, useful tool. Another incredibly useful one is the Architect's Handbook for Professional Practice. I can pretty much guarantee that the Architect's Handbook for Professional Practice will be the direct source for probably 30 or so questions. You are bound to get quite a number of questions that come directly out of the Handbook for Professional Practice. Things about contracts, things about working with clients, things about insurance, things about the ethics of the expected ethical understandings that the AIA produces. A whole series of different possibilities. So those 2 books I think are incredibly helpful, along with all the other guidebooks and regular sort of things you might find. Another sort of thing I would definitely take a look at is all of your Ching books. Most of you probably have some Ching books left over from school. If you don't, somebody you know does. If you don't have that, go buy them. Essentially, Ching codified the way that architects talk to each other and to other people. And so the exam, the people who wrote the exam all used Ching when they were going through school. It's just a very useful set of books. The obvious big one is, building construction, I forget the exact name, but there's a bunch of other ones. There's a very good book on how codes work. There's a series of other really fantastic books. So absolutely check those out. Graphic standards, there's many other books like that you could get some really good information. One of my personal favorites, although it's a less important one, but I like it a lot, is called Sun, Wind, Light. It might be the other way around, might be Sun, Light, Wind, which talks about orientation and site conditions and topography and things like that in a really simple graphic way. So find your resources that are going to be sort of good for you to sort of track down a bunch of this information. But there's a bunch of other resources as well. Like one of the things that happens often, I'll be talking to somebody and they'll say, oh, I'm starting to take the exam and I just don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where to start. And I'd say, well, do you know anybody who's taken the exam recently? And they'd say, yes. And I say, well, have you talked to them? And they say, no. It's like, well, go talk to them. Go start a conversation. First of all, because you get information from that. But second of all, they probably have some of these books. They probably have some of the stuff. Maybe you have something they need and you can share it or something, right? Find your resources. So talk to your friends. Think about people who you are working with. Maybe somebody who you don't really know has taken the exam recently. Or maybe there's just some of the older folks and the people who've been architects for a bit of time that don't have any idea that you're going through it and don't know to sort of help out. Now, one of the things you'll find is that not everybody is going to be great at helping you get through this. So, you don't necessarily want to get advice from everybody, but there's going to be plenty of people who you work with who are really useful, and almost every architect had a thing about getting through the ARE. So when you go up and you say, hey, I'm about to do this thing, I'd love to talk to you about it, they will all say, sounds great, let's go get a cup of coffee, or let's go sit in the conference room. So find your resources. You have the resources already. If you aren't working right now and you don't have those resources, or none of your friends have gone through it yet, well, then find other resources. Another good example would be your local AIA chapter. Here in Chicago, the AIA Chicago chapter does a great job of setting up, having resources available, setting up meetings, all kinds of things. And then AIA in general has a whole series of different things called like emerging professionals, and a series of different events that they run. Those are great places to start not only getting actual information, but also meeting other people who are in the same boat. You can start sharing all of those things, all those books and all of that. So the books, the AIA offices, your friends, you got people in your office. And as Mark mentioned, one of the things that a lot of the different offices will do is, not everybody does this, but a lot will pay for part of your exam, or they might pay for some of the books. They would prefer that you are a better architect. They want you to go through this process and learn more. So they may pay for some of your exam, they may pay for some of your resources, they may pay for a class. There's a whole series of different possibilities. So don't wallow around, find the resources and start moving forward.
So a couple thoughts here. So these are awesome, Mike. And I couldn't agree more about talking to your friends, talking to folks in your office, AIA. And one thought here is, when you start reaching out to people in your office, hint, hint, reach out to your manager or their manager, the owner of the company or some of the principals, and let them know. Go ask them for some feedback. Like, hey, I'm thinking about taking the test, and tell me your experience. And that's going to do two things. One is you're going to probably get some good feedback, but two, it's going to signal to them, right, that you're taking your professional development seriously as well as your profession seriously. It's going to make you look really good. And make them think highly of you, I suppose. It might also give you, maybe thirdly, might give you a little bit of cover too, because it takes time to do the studying and take tests, and so
you may need to leave at 5 every day for a couple months.
And sometimes, you can tell your project manager who you're maybe working under, but sometimes it might also be good to tell the principal too, because sometimes your project manager needs cover as well, and so when the principal sort of knows, that's helpful. One other thought here on the books is, as Mike said, these are the books. Like, these are, in fact, I'm quite sure that NCARB references them in their exam guides. One thing we hear a lot is that people can get really kind of confused. Like, that Meeb's book is probably 600 or 700 pages. In fact, I know we have at least one copy here in our office, and it's holding up a monitor. It's so big.
I think I have 3 versions of it over the time. Yeah.
We have all those, of course, here. And so I might sort of put a disclaimer on that. There's so much really, really, really highly detailed information in these things. People can really get freaked out by the amount of information in here. So just to sort of reiterate, what Mike is saying is, these are the references, but
you're not going to read them from beginning to end.
If what you're hearing from us is that we're saying that you should read all these, that's not what we're saying. But instead, these are the references. In fact, that's actually what, and I'm going to sort of brag a little bit, if I may, we do really well here at Black Spectacles, in particular with Mike's lectures, is we help cut through all 5,000 pages and really kind of get to the things you need to know for the exam. So, we have one of the questions here. In fact, there's a variety of questions about getting these books. And having too many materials can get confusing. Is there a way to tone it down? The answer to that question is, that's what we've done with the lectures, is simplified it, because the thing that we always like to joke about is NCARB is not testing you on everything in MEBS, but instead they're testing you on minimum competency, which is a very thin layer of what's covered in a lot of these books. So these are the ones that you want to have around for occasional reference, but if you're reading all of them, you're probably going way too deep.
Absolutely.
Based on what's going on in exams.
The big advantage of something like MEB is, you see it in a guidebook or a reference in a question somewhere to something, and you're like, I don't know what that is. Well, you have an easy place to look it up, right? That's where it's truly useful. And then when you're looking it up, you look at some of the graphs or some of the photos, and you're like, oh, well, I see, I get this. I know what it is. I don't need to spend any more time on it. Or, I have no idea what this is. I'm going to read that chapter, and then I'm focused on my use of it, so I'm not just like wallowing in it.
Yeah, and actually as a reference, and we just recently encountered someone was telling us, I spent like $1,000 on all these books, and then I just stared at them because I just couldn't like read them, and I just was
Yeah.
sort of overwhelmed.
This is one of the big advantages of videos.
I was going to say, this is a good example where your AI chapter might be useful. They may have these books. They may be at your library. Your firm might have them. So, and I know how I'm the same way. Like sometimes I'll go buy a bunch of books to start the process. I'm putting quotes around that. But you're really just sort of like kind of
It's a false start,
procrastinating.
yeah.
So keep that in mind as you're thinking about this.
Yeah, and then one last thing about this, just to kind of get back to the office thing, is first of all, your office probably has these books sitting somewhere. They may have forgotten where they are, but somebody's probably got them. But the other thing is, if you have a big enough office, if there's 15 people or 20 people in your office, or it's bigger than that, there's probably a couple of other people going through the same thing as you are. And if you can kind of band together and you go to your main boss and you say, hey, look, we really want to do this. We need some more resources. Could you get us an office resource of black spectacles? Or can you buy the series of books from this or that, right? That it's not just you alone. Find those people around you.